What's going to make installing the hoods the easiest is going to be to predetermine where the center lines are of each of these valleys. And the nice thing about all of the ducts, and I believe there's 5 of them, is that none of them are direct through wall connections. And so we can locate one of these ducts based off the plans on the center line, and as long as it's close inside that wall, we can connect to it on the inside later on and route that duct where it needs to go. So we have the flexibility to install these ducts on center lines within reason. So for instance, I don't know what type of exterior hood will show up on the job site. Here I've got a cheapy plastic one, but the nice thing is a 4-inch hood will easily fall in between the valleys on this Norclad siding. So as long as we're close to center, it goes right in. The other thing is our 8-inch hood, if our hole is centered between the valleys, falls on 2 ribs, so it's really easy to seal here. We can then, for instance, if you've got this guy sitting on 2 ribs, you can then put a reverse closure strip in here, some foam weather strip, and this here can be sealed with caulking, and that way you've got a seal on all 3 sides. Any water coming down the outside should run out and around this duct opening. In our case, we've got a 6-incher, and these guys are going to be a little trickier because, at least in my case here, this flange just barely fits over these ribs. Because we've got our crimped edge facing outward, this lip here, which we've trimmed back, fits over our crimped edge. And the idea here is, with all of our ducting, is that it's installed shingle style so that any water that gets in here doesn't run behind the ducting. Same thing here, the water just runs out right through this opening, rather than if this were installed inside the duct, then in theory water could get back in there and cause us some problems. So here, I would just install this guy right over the outside. And in this case, I've gotten lucky on the top. I'll be able to run 2 trim screws in here and fasten this. The bottom is loose. I'm not so sure that I'm concerned, but there are options. For instance, if this were way off, I could just use a scrap of 26 gauge, cut a hole in it. Now I've been able to extend the bearing here of my flange. You know, a scrap of 26 gauge trim or metal would work just to basically widen out our bearing surface. You'd obviously cock these 2 guys together and mount them. If your ducting were to fall in the center, which is what we're trying to avoid because we're trying to center our ducts in these valleys, and we've got a couple other ideas here I'll talk about.